Mr. President, I'm expecting my colleague, Senator Rubio, to be joining here on the floor as we want to talk about some of the legislative fixes to some of the problems that have come out as a result of these devastating hurricanes. It's been 5 months since Hurricane Irma hit Florida. It's been 4 months since Maria hit Puerto Rico and Irma hit Puerto Rico as well. And of course, before the Florida hurricane of Irma, you had all the problem of the flooding with another hurricane in Texas, and then later on, the wildfires in California. And so I'm happy to finally be able to say that we have a path forward now on a disaster aid bill for all of these natural disasters. Now, I can't count on the fingers of both hands how many times I've been out here, and I could say the same of the letters and speeches that Senator Rubio and I have both made together about this disaster aid and the need for it. And finally, we are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel that there's a good possibility that this is going to happen in the Senate within the next 2 days. Because the problem is that American citizens have been living without power. Schools and businesses are closed, and this is in Puerto Rico, and the federal government has been dragging its feet to help them. People have been waiting, and they've been suffering. And over a third of the people in Puerto Rico are, as right now, closing in on 5 months after the hurricane, without electricity. Potable water is still a problem in Puerto Rico. Now, can you imagine any other mainland state if nearly 5 months after a hurricane and a third of the people didn't have electricity restored? I mean, there'd be such outrage and demonstrations. Well, this is what's going on in Puerto Rico. And finally, I think we are able to see in this disaster bill some assistance to the island as well as to the Virgin Islands, and especially to our state of Florida that was hit so hard. So I want to outline some of this, but just to tell the Senate that Senator Rubio, I've been talking about all the things that we have done together ad infinitum in trying to get this disaster aid package to finally come to the point at which we can say we are so thankful that we see a path forward. We've discussed over and over with Senate leadership, Florida's agriculture industry needs help. Our schools need additional funding to deal with the influx of students from Puerto Rico into Florida. Our critical infrastructure, such as the Lake Okeechobee Dike, it needs funding to withstand a future storm. The agriculture industry in our state sustained significant damage after Irma. The citrus growers suffered approximately $760 million of loss. Why? Because as right after the hurricane, the citrus grove in Central Florida that Senator Rubio and I visited, half the crop was on the ground. But you go further south in Florida, and there are groves where actually 100% of the oranges because of the ferocity of the wind, ended up on the ground. That's a crop total loss. And the wind was so severe there that it uprooted some of the trees. And so the loss was crippling to the industry. And of course, this is an industry that's been battling to keep its life blood flowing because it's been battling this bacteria called greening that will kill a tree in 5 years. We've got another program going on of the Citrus Research Fund trying to find the magic cure, but in the meantime, they've found some ways to keep the trees and some different variety of trees to live longer than the 5 years. But we've got to address the problem right now. And so if the poor citrus growers didn't have enough trouble with all the citrus canker from years earlier, now they're producing 46 million boxes a year. And by the way, that used to be in excess of 200 million boxes a year of citrus harvested 10 years ago. The funding in this disaster bill will be essential in helping the citrus industry recover. Now, additionally, Senator Rubio and I have called for, many times before, Florida schools need funding in the aftermath of Irma and Maria. We now know that up to date, about 12,000 students from Puerto Rico that have evacuated to Florida, they are enrolled. Others from the Virgin Islands have enrolled in Florida schools. Every child has a right to a quality education, but that can't happen without the appropriate resources. The schools need help. No child should have their education hindered by a natural disaster. And so this disaster aid bill is going to be crucial for schools' funding in order to do their best to ensure that those students are receiving the education they deserve. And this deal also includes $15 billion for the Army Corps of Engineers. It's for mitigation and resiliency projects. And that, likewise, the two senators from Florida have been working on to ensure that some of those funds are used to expedite the construction on the Lake Okeechobee Dike. It's a critical public safety project, and it should be completed as quickly as possible. We want to see it accelerated by 3 years for its completion from 2025 to 2022. And so if the Army Corps of Engineers, out of these additional resources, will take $200 million a year for the next several years, they can speed up the construction of that dike. And so we're going to be continuing to have sessions with the Army Corps of Engineers to try to accomplish just that. And so there's a long list, an exhaustive list of the needs of Florida after the hurricane. And now, as we see so many of our fellow U.S. citizens on Puerto Rico, you just can't keep treating U.S. citizens like they are. So hopefully, this is going to speed up the recovery efforts. And that's why when the news broke last week that FEMA reportedly planned to end, get this, end distributing food and water. Obviously, there was an outrage, and there was outrage of the two senators here. And we appreciate FEMA making clear the next day that they would continue to provide aid to the people, and that includes that food and water. And so as we've discussed with the Senate leadership about what was essential in this disaster aid bill, it's an important step to the recovery of the people of Florida and Puerto Rico. And then there's another thing that I've got to mention, and that is, can you believe that the Medicaid money that was given to Puerto Rico in a lump sum called a block grant, it's going to run out next month. But the $4.8 billion in supplemental for Puerto Rico's Medicaid program, along with the 100% federal match for 2 years, we can guarantee that 1 million of our fellow U.S. citizens on the island won't be denied health care coverage when they need it the most. Otherwise, it's going to run out next month. It's long overdue. It's long, long overdue. We can finally provide some much needed relief for disaster-affected areas. So please, let's pass this aid bill this week and let's send it to the President.